Well, guys, it finally happened. Cathie Wood and Ark Invest are buying Rocket Lab. This is an extremely controversial fund. A lot of people hate them recently. Some people still love them. Let's talk about what this means for the stock. I'm Dave, and let's talk Rocket Lab. So I expect most of you are probably already familiar with Ark Invest. It's been in the news a lot over the past couple of years, but just for people who might not be familiar with it, it got extremely popular a couple years back. Their big thing is investing in new, disruptive, innovative technology. A lot of the companies they invest in are not yet profitable and trying to disrupt an established industry with some sort of new tech. So they did extremely well for a couple years. They got a lot of press. You can see in the chart here to the right, they went from under $50 to $150, so that's a triple in about a year, which is for an ETF unheard of. Maybe you get something like that in the odd individual company, but for an ETF holding a basket of companies, it's really not something you expect to see. Obviously, they did it by buying a lot of these new growing tech startups, but those are the same companies that have been hit hardest over the past year now and have absolutely been destroyed. So we can see they've gone all the way back down to basically the lows of where they were before. If you held on to the fund throughout this entire couple of years, you made a triple and then you lost it all. So right now they actually get a lot of hate in the market because they've really stuck to their guns and continued doubling down on these newer companies that are not yet making a profit that the market absolutely hates right now. So a lot of people are kind of making fun of them, talking down on them. Some people are actually even shorting their fund as a way to try and take advantage of the current market environment. And as we can see through this chart, the shorts on ARK have done extremely well for themselves. So it's a very controversial fund. A lot of people are now very much against Cathie Woods and Ark Invest. She's the one who runs the fund. She's kind of doubling down and saying we're still in for some great disruptive growth ahead, and these companies are extremely cheap at these levels. Anyway, wherever you fall on this, a couple of her funds have finally started buying Rocket Lab for the first time. They've never actually owned Rocket Lab before. She has a space ETF as well as just their standard flagship Ark ETF that holds all sorts of disruptive companies. The space one has held Virgin Galactic before. I don't think they did amazing on that. I'm not exactly sure when they got out, but they've never held Rocket Lab, which I found quite odd because I would really say they're the number 2 launcher in the space industry in the United States. They do hold Iridium and some other satellite operators as well, from what I understand. But anyway, just the other day, we found out that Cathie Wood's ARK is now buying Rocket Lab. They bought 729,000 shares between two funds, ARK-Q and ARK-X. So the purchases mark the first time that they have owned this company. And by the way, can we stop calling Rocket Lab a space SPAC here? I mean, they've been public for quite a while. They're a real company with real earnings, real products. Why can't we just call them Rocket Lab? Why do we have to call them a space SPAC? Like, are we looking down at how they went public? I think they actually did extremely well to go public when they did and raise more capital than they really need. They're not like some of these other SPACs who I think kind of took advantage of investors, went public without any real products and just kind of hype. I don't really think Rocket Lab falls into that category at all. So I kind of find it annoying personally when we keep referring to Rocket Lab as a space SPAC because, you know, that's in the past at this point. But anyway, going deeper into Rocket Lab, going deeper into ARK, they launched a dedicated space ETF in 2021. I mean, I don't know how you have a space ETF and not hold Rocket Lab in it, but they both this past Monday added Rocket Lab stock. So these numbers of shares are pretty small when you consider the size of these funds and the size of Rocket Lab. 729,000 shares. I mean, it's not tiny. I'd love to have that number of shares, of course, but this is only the 37th and 35th largest positions in these funds. So you can look at that as bad in saying that, well, it's small, no big deal. Or you can look at that as good and say, well, maybe now that they're starting to buy, they'll continue to buy. And that might put upward pressure on the stock as these large funds continue to buy. Some people actually think this is a downside because so many people are so negative on Ark lately that they think, oh, any company that Cathie Wood buys is going to get shorted into oblivion and drop even further. I have thought about that, but I think overall, anyone buying Rocket Lab is a net good in terms of increasing the demand for the stock and pushing it up. So I would say I'm more happy than unhappy with this development. I think anytime a big fund starts buying, it's really good and not bad. So funds of this size, with Rocket Lab still being a small company, if they decided to go heavier on Rocket Lab and push it up to like a top 10 position, I do think that could potentially move the stock at least a little bit. By the way, guys, if you find my Rocket Lab content interesting, please click like and subscribe down below to help out the channel, and let me know in the comments below what you think of these moves. Also, we do have a Discord server in the description if you want to join us and discuss investing there, share ideas, and just hang out in our Discord. Interesting fund that I saw owned the Rocket Lab stock is the XAR, which is State Street Global Advisors ETF, Aerospace and Defense ETF. Matt here in the comments the other day actually asked me to mention it. So here you go, Matt. This one's for you. I actually found it was interesting and looked into it myself. It's actually an extremely large position for this ETF, which made me very surprised. We checked the report as of September 29th, and I saw that Rocket Lab was their #1 holding, which is at 5.3%. Now, this isn't brand new. From what I can tell, they've held Rocket Lab since about late June, maybe June 30th. Not 100% sure on that, but that's what it looks like to me. But yeah, they don't actually publish all their trades immediately like Ark does. But anyway, the biggest thing I found interesting was, like, this is a pretty safe, old school aerospace and defense ETF. So you see a lot of names like Boeing, like old school names in here, and to have Rocket Lab at #1, I think is a huge vote of confidence for Rocket Lab, because a lot of the times these funds will rate it for market cap or something like that, so the biggest players in the industry will kind of have the biggest share in the fund. That's clearly not what they're doing here. For one reason or another, they seem to really believe in Rocket Lab and have it #1, so that's actually big vote of confidence from like actual Wall Street money managers who seem to think Rocket Lab is a great investment. So that's something I really like to see. Also, I think that the fact this is an aerospace and defense ETF, especially defense right now, is looking like we're going to get a lot more money in the defense area over the next few years. We have this situation in Ukraine. A lot of people are really ramping up their defense funding. A lot of people think defense is going to be a booming industry and are starting to invest more and more in defense. So if Rocket Lab kind of gets categorized with defense companies, it could be great for Rocket Lab and channel a lot more money into the stock, help push it up. The other thing you can think about is there's a lot of other funds similar to XAR. For example, we have ITA, and there's several others like aerospace and defense ETFs. This one doesn't actually hold any Rocket Lab. They have a lot of, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, a lot of names that you would think. But if we get other funds like this also adding to Rocket Lab, that could as well push the stock. So maybe they see XAR buying, or maybe they see the same things the XAR managers did and they consider adding as well. If we get more and more of these large funds adding Rocket Lab, it can only do good things for the stock. If we look at the top shareholders in Rocket Lab, the top 25 shareholders own 76.32% of the company. So it's a big deal. The top owners are a huge deal. It's not like, it's really distributed and every share, they're all like 1% or less. We have massive amounts of top loading going on here. So if we add more companies into this top 25, or even if these companies decide to add more, it can really move the stock. Other than, of course, Peter Beck, he's an individual, but a lot of interesting names here, a lot of funds. Vector Capital, Lockheed Martin's an interesting one. You wouldn't think of them as someone who would invest in Rocket Lab, but they have. And then, of course, oh, this is State Street Global Advisors, by the way, that I was talking about. We have BlackRock, Vanguard, a lot of big names. Interesting that the Australian government would invest in Rocket Lab. They're really based in New Zealand, not Australia. I'm not too sure why Australia's in there. Maybe just don't want to get left out or something like that. Who knows? But if we see a lot of these big funds buying more Rocket Lab stock, it can absolutely move the share price. So overall, I do think this is a good thing as opposed to a bad thing, having ARK buy Rocket Lab. If they can keep buying more shares in the future, it could move the stock. Anytime you get any of these big players buying more of the shares, it can really move the share price. As we saw, the top 25 is extremely overweight in terms of how much of Rocket Lab they own versus the bottom 20% or whatever, or 15% even. What do you guys think? Are you happy that Ark Invest is buying Rocket Lab? Would you consider owning Ark Invest these days, or have you been too burned on the past couple years and their recent losses? Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.